The oral arguments in the Supreme Court case as to whether or not Donald Trump can be removed from a state's ballot over insurrection are currently underway as I record this segment. It is live right now. Now, we don't know exactly what will happen, how they will rule on this issue. But if the demeanor of the liberal justices says anything, they are going to get crushed. The Democrats, that is. Absolutely fascinating arguments and determinations being made in real time. You can see the arguments, you can see the understanding, and it looks like some are suggesting 9-0. All liberal justices actually saying you can't remove Donald Trump. And it's fascinating because it seems like they've broken down the meaning behind the 14th Amendment, the clause about someone not being able to someone not being able to hold office based on having been an insurrectionist. And the arguments from the Democrat side to remove Trump absolutely make zero sense. And it seems like some of the justices are getting frustrated. In one segment, one portion of the debate, of the arguments, Gorsuch is actually like, stop, don't, no, answer the question. And they can't. And he says, if you don't have an answer, that's fine. I'm going to break down for you so far where we're at with what we've got, and it is absolutely fascinating. Now, the question at hand right now is whether or not Donald Trump can run for president under the idea that he waged insurrection against the United States. But there are a lot of holes. It's not just a question of whether Trump is an insurrectionist. It's a question of, does Section 3 of the 14th Amendment even apply to the president? Which it seems like already the Supreme Court justices have determined it does not. In one instance, pointing out that the president commissions all officers, in which case he would be above any of these restrictions. Now, I believe that there is a simple and logical reason as to why the president does not fall under the purview of the 14th Amendment, Section 3. They can make all their arguments, but I will start with this. Let's go to the beginning. January 6th, Democrats claim Trump waged insurrection. Okay. Under that premise, they have begun removing him from the ballot in several states, Maine, notably, and unilaterally. Now, the first argument is whether or not there's ever actually been a determination that Trump did engage in insurrection. And the answer is no. He's not even charged with it. Now, there are questions about January 6th and the criminal charges he does face, but he's not facing the specific charge of insurrection. So then you have the questions of whether or not he falls under the jurisdiction, the purview of that amendment, to which, as I mentioned, they're saying no. Now let's go back in time. Why would it be that the president would not be included in the 14th Amendment? Let me show you the 14th Amendment right now. Section 3 is the one being brought up, and I want to give you my view on this, which I'm not a lawyer and I could totally be wrong, and I probably am, but I want to bring this up anyway. And then we'll read all the latest updates, which y'all are going to love. I just want to say it again. It looks like Trump may win this handily. Section 3 says no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Interesting. So let's start here, and I will give you my thoughts. To go back to the Civil War. Why is it that following the Civil War, a constitutional amendment would be created saying that you can't be a senator or representative or an officer, et cetera, but not include the president? I think it's actually quite simple. When it comes to an issue of the Senate or Congress, this is an insurrectionist state would decide we are going to send someone to Congress to vote who wants to secede or believes in secession. No, we will not allow that. From this point forward, you southern states, if you're going to choose a senator, which they used to do by state level, it wasn't a popular vote, or if you're going to send a member of Congress that you elect, they cannot have waged insurrection. Fair point. But why not the president? Simple. Because the northern states get a say in who the president is. It's that simple. Would the South have actually agreed to terms leading up to 76? Were they told you would never be allowed to have a president again, or your leaders are disqualified? Congress, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, may remove such disability. My view is simply this. It was even Trump's lawyers who made the argument, if there was any office you'd want to disqualify, it's going to be the president. I suppose their argument being, if they did not explicitly state the president, then certainly they did not mean for the president to be barred. Because if it really was the most important issue, they'd outright be like, you can't be president. No, I actually think it makes sense. Let's say post-Civil War Reconstruction era. South needs to send reps. No. Those guys waged insurrection against us. We are not going to allow them in and vote for more turmoil or chaos. Now, what about the president? Send whoever you want to be president, because we're going to vote no. It's that simple. Northern states would not vote for someone they thought was a threat to the country, and that each state has a right to determine who the president would be. This is the purpose of ending the Civil War, that the South is brought back into the fold. But the insurrectionists, we don't want a state choosing to send someone into Congress because New York has no say in whether or not South Carolina decides to send someone who wants to wage insurrection. Get it? I think it makes a lot of sense. But let's start here. We have this from the Daily Mail. Even the Supreme Court liberals appear skeptical of kicking Trump off the ballot. Justice Elena Kagan says it would be extraordinary if a state could stop a candidate from running in blockbuster arguments over barring the ex-president in 2024. Yo, it's so wild. Everybody's got live feeds running. It's crazy. Let's start here with some arguments made by Trump's lawyers. This is CNN's update. Here's to know about the initial arguments made by Trump's lawyer. Let's start here. Power of the states. Several of the justices from both ideological sides pressed the Trump lawyer about stripping states of their ability to exclude candidates from power, including whether an admitted insurrectionist could be removed from the ballot. Mitchell argued that it was the role of Congress to determine whether someone should be disqualified. So even if a person admits to being an insurrectionist, states have no basis to act. Quote, even if the candidate is an admitted insurrectionist, Section 3 still allows the candidate to run for office and even win election for office and then see whether Congress lifts that disability after the election, Mitchell said in response to a question from Chief Justice John Roberts. A very interesting point. Simply put, the 14th Amendment doesn't say you can't run for office. Stop. There we are. Nowhere does it say you are not allowed to run for election. It just says you can't hold office. There's a lot to break down in this. I'll give you the simple version. They argue that the president is not an office under the United States. That matters. Why? It's not about this provision. Trump's lawyer pointed out, under the office under the United States appears in different provisions. I believe the impeachment clause, the emoluments clause, and if they issue a ruling on it, it will have massive implications for other issues, and it would actually cause serious problems. It could theoretically exempt the president from the emoluments clause, which makes no sense, meaning the president could profit personally off of being president. So the argument here is you can't be an elector of or hold any office, but more importantly, officers are appointed positions. That is, the president appoints them. There's a lot to break down, though. The role of Congress. Mitchell argued that Colorado's decision to remove Trump from the ballot was improper because, among other reasons, the state disqualified Trump before Congress explicitly gave it the power to do that. The debate over the term officer. The justices pressed Mitchell over whether the framers of the 14th Amendment believe the president is an officer of the United States and therefore subject to the insurrection ban. The argument is a central focus of the former president's legal team, which believes that when the amendment's framers wrote officer, they meant lower federal officials, you see, officer officials, appointed by the president, not the president himself. It seems like Gorsuch completely agrees, but we'll get to that. The discussion led to a particularly intense exchange. For an insurrection, there needs to be an organized, concerted effort to overthrow the government of the United States through violence, Mitchell said. A chaotic effort to overthrow the government is not an insurrection? Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson asked. Mitchell responded, this was a riot. It was not an insurrection. Mitchell will have an opportunity to make a brief rebuttal to arguments, et cetera, et cetera. But let's jump through some of these. In the officer debate, Julie Kelly tweets, Murray again not helping himself. This is Murray is the lawyer for the Democrats. President Trump had a 5-day trial, really. Keep in mind who testified at his trial, Eric Swalwell and D.C. Metro cop Daniel Hodges, caught misrepresenting his experience during at least one trial. Kavanaugh notes that Trump has not been charged with 2382, the insurrection statute. If the concern you have that insurrectionists should not hold office, there is a tool to make sure that happens, which is criminal prosecution. Cav says Murray's position could disenfranchise voters to a great degree. Murray says Section 3 is intended to protect constitutional democracy. President Trump tried to disenfranchise 80 million voters. These are emotional nonsense exclamations. They're not even arguments. Yeah, but Trump was trying to do this. I don't care what you think Trump was trying to do. Was he charged with insurrection? Has a determination of insurrection even taken place? Is he even an officer? Answer the questions. Oh, boy. Greg Price tweeted, "This is just a bloodbath. Justice Gorsuch, I don't know how to pronounce it, spends 2 minutes slapping around Colorado's lawyer. You almost got to feel bad for the guy." Let me play this clip for you. You can hear it for yourself. Make sure we get the audio properly done.
He is disqualified from holding office from the moment it happens.
Correct, but nevertheless,
you say he is disqualified from holding office from the moment it happens.
Correct, but nevertheless,
so it operates. You say that there's no legislation necessary. I thought that was the whole theory of your case, and no procedure necessary. It happens automatically.
Well, certainly you need a procedure in order to have any remedy to enforce the disqualification, which is different.
That's a whole separate question. That's the de facto doctrine. It doesn't work here. Okay, put that aside.
So let me explain briefly where they're at in this argument. What the Democrat lawyer has said is the moment Trump committed insurrection, that's it. He's disqualified. Thank you and have a nice day. Well, that creates a whole lot of problems, you see, because Donald Trump was president when they alleged that he committed insurrection. And what does that mean for anyone who followed his orders after the fact? You see the problem with trying to make an argument that the 14th Amendment already disqualified Trump and you don't need an act of Congress or a law or a criminal charge. This is where it comes from. They want to say we can take Trump off the ballot simply because he committed insurrection on that moment on January 6th. Problem. The Supreme Court in its entirety, it would seem, is arguing there needs to be some kind of due process, legislative action from Congress, criminal charges, something to determine this did happen. Let me play more.
He's disqualified from the moment, self-executing, done. And I would think that a person who would receive a direction from that person, the president, former president, in your view, would be free to act as he or she wishes without regard to that individual.
I don't think so, because I think, again, the de facto officer doctrine would nevertheless come into play to say this is...
No, de facto, that doesn't work, Mr. Murray, because de facto officer is to ratify the conduct that's done afterwards and insulate it from judicial review. Put that aside. I'm not going to say it again. Put it aside, okay? I think Justice Alito's asking a very different question, a more pointed one, and more difficult one for you, I understand. But I think it deserves an answer. On your theory, would anything compel a lower official to obey an order from, in your view, the former president?
So let me just say this again. Gorsuch is asking, Donald Trump is president. You claim he engaged in insurrection on January 6th. He is still president. You argue he's immediately disqualified. Yes, you need legislative action for some kind of remedy, but you're saying right now, bang. So a lower federal official who reports to the president is what? Not supposed to follow any orders now? How do you make that determination?
I'm imagining a situation where, for example, a former president was, a president was elected and they were 25 and they were ineligible to hold office, but nevertheless they were put into that office.
No, we're talking about Section 3. Please don't change the hypothetical, okay? Please don't change the hypothetical. I know I like doing it too, but please don't do it, okay?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is
he's disqualified from the moment he committed an insurrection, whoever it is, whichever party, that happens. Boom. It happened. What would compel, and I'm not going to say it again, so just try and answer the question. If you don't have an answer, fair enough, we'll move on. What would compel a lower official to obey an order from that individual?
There it is right there. It's absurd. There was no determination that Trump committed an insurrection on January 6th, and there were many people who still reported to him for the next 2 weeks. So these people would have to just unilaterally decide internally that, think about what would happen. On January 6th, the riot happens, right? The left screams insurrection. Democratic-leaning individuals in the federal government immediately say, we will no longer accept any orders. He is no longer the president. Republican-leaning would be like, well, you're crazy. It was a riot. It wasn't an insurrection. It would rip the country apart instantly with left-leaning refusing to take orders from the president. And that's it. Congratulations. Instant chaos. I do not believe that's what the framers of the 14th Amendment wanted to happen. Man, this is wild. Posobiec tweets, Gorsuch just schooled this lawyer that the Constitution states the president commissions all officers of the United States, and the president himself cannot be one of the officers since he's the one who appoints them. Wow. We'll come to that last one in a minute. We have an AP report coming out. We have Sung Min Kim of the AP saying, Supreme Court sounds broadly skeptical of efforts to kick President Donald Trump off the ballot. This is amazing. Jack Posobiec says, even Ketanji is pointing out that the office of president is not listed in the 14th Amendment. Now, one really interesting argument did emerge, I think, is pointing out. It's separate from, I don't think it'll play a role, but it is an interesting argument, and it's a byproduct we should consider. I tweeted, a byproduct of Cenk Uyghur's running for office is to create a clear example of states making individual determinations as to whether a person is allowed on the ballot based on federal criteria. This argument being used to say Trump should be removed if a state determines it. This actually came up. The lawyer for the Democrats pointed out what they're trying to argue right now, and this is points for them. We'll see. I think the Supreme Court's probably going to throw this one out. I think it's obvious at this point, but who knows? Who knows? What they're trying to say is this. Donald Trump, fine, may or may not be an insurrectionist, but the states can figure out for themselves if he is and remove him. Now, the funny thing is, even liberal justices said, do you have any idea the ramifications to the election if states start just unilaterally removing people? The repercussions are national. And I think, what do they call it? Like the national imperative or something like this? The states must act with understanding that their actions will impact the federal government and every other state. That is to say, you can't just disqualify the front runner. But the Democrats made the argument that there are many states right now where some people are or are not on ballots. How is that is that a problem? Nikki Haley is not on the caucus tonight for Donald Trump in Nevada, but she was on the primary. Some people weren't on the ballots in some states. Are we going to shut everything down and say we can't have this? No, it's for the states to figure out. Interesting point. He said right now, there are candidates who are not even who are not even natural born citizens who are on or not on some of the ballots. Some states have said you can run, and some have said you can't. Cenk Uyghur. Now, some are suggesting this is intentionally why he ran, to create this predicament for the Trump team. I don't think the Supreme Court justices, even the liberal ones, are stupid enough to fall for this. I don't think that's why Cenk Uyghur actually ran. The argument being that he knew some states would say, despite the fact you're not a natural born citizen, you are on the ballot. And others would say, you are not a natural born citizen, you're off the ballot. And thus, creating a circumstance in which states decide for themselves, based on federal criteria, whether to include someone on the ballot. And as such, the states could decide Trump falls under Amendment 14, Section 3 criteria to be removed from the ballot. I don't believe that. Because the question of Cenk Uygur's running for office in this circumstance has yet to be adjudicated by the Supreme Court. So it's simply saying like some dude threw a pie, therefore, no. The guy who threw it hasn't been arrested yet. We'll get to that later. If the courts had already ruled states could make these determinations, then fine, but they haven't. So this, I think, is a meaningless argument and actually shows the weakness of the left's position on this one. It looks like, based on everything we're seeing, it looks like Trump's going to win this one. Ketanji Brown seems pretty perturbed, but the other, the liberal justices seem to be like, I don't understand why you think you can do this. It is insane to remove the front runner for the 2024 election from the ballot without legislative or criminal prosecution. It's nuts. So here's what must happen. You want to take Trump off the ballot, you need to criminally prosecute him, which requires impeachment. They tried to impeach him. It failed. And this is why they tried to impeach him. And it failed. They can't do it. It makes sense. After the Civil War, the leaders of the United States did not want another one. Reconstruction ended with, I believe it was 1876, when separate slates of electors were sent and everyone was like, oh crap, this could be Civil War all over again. And they compromised. And they said, here's what we're going to do. We'll give you the presidency, but we end Reconstruction. And we did. That's how it came to an end. Compromise. We did not want war. It makes sense that when they put this thing together, that you would have to impeach the president before determining an insurrection. Why? They want it to be very difficult to create these rifts. If the Democrats were correct in their argument, the moment January 6th happened, the moment the first barricade was breached, it would be an obligation of every federal officer of the country to defy orders from Trump. And take them from who, though? Mike Pence? No idea. We have nothing in place for that. The framers of the 14th did not expect that to be the case. So the Democrats' argument is meaningless. But of course, the arguments are still going on. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but heck of an update. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.